Good evening, everyone. Welcome from Berlin and Tel Aviv. That's our two locations for this night. We have an honor, and thank you so much, Rutu Modan, for taking this invitation from Pilecki-Institut Berlin to have you here.
My pleasure.
To spend this evening with you. We are so glad. And on behalf of Pilecki-Institut Berlin, I would like to welcome all of you, all of the attendees from around the world, probably, here in probably your living spaces. I would like to just give you our plan for this meeting. We'll start from Rutu Modan's lecture, and then we'll open our room for you, for the public, so you can ask Rutu Modan's question. And this part will be moderated by our curators of our project Living Archive, a laboratory of documentary comics, after Rutu's lecture. And please use Q&A mode in your webinar rooms. For that, unfortunately, we cannot see you, but hopefully you are seeing us. And yeah, I think that's enough for now. And I would like to pass the virtual mic to our curator, Kai Pfeiffer. Thank you.
Yes, hello to everyone, to all the listeners and the participants, Rutu and Monika, my co-curator for the Living Archives project. Yeah, the Living Archives project is as Gregor said, a laboratory for documentary comics. So we have a team of 16 authors from Berlin working on historic comic stories for common book publication to be due out in autumn. And in alignment with this project, we have a series of events. And our guest today, Rutu Modan, she will talk more about it herself, is not actually doing strictly documentary comics. She's doing fictional comics, but she uses the methods of documentary and historic research to construct her stories. And I always like to stress this fact when talking to students or colleagues that, you know, the practice of documentation, observation, and historic research informs not only the so-called documentary comics, but also fictional stories. So we have to be aware of our surroundings and what was before us. And the way that Rutu Modan works with this, I'm very pleased and curious to hear more about it. And I follow her work for a long time now, even back when I was myself a student, or even a little before she published this little booklet here, when she was still doing the comics group Actus Tragicus in Israel. So for us as young students, I think this booklet is from '95, a very different aesthetics than she's working in now. Back in the day, the Actus Tragicus group made Israel aware for us for the first time as a place where comics are happening too. And I think it's safe to say that Rutu further on with her 3 big graphic novels, the first one being Blutlinien in German, original English title is Exit Wounds, was the first one in 2007, followed by The Property, or in German Das Erbe, in 2013. And only last year, or beginning of the year, brand new, her book Tunnel. I think Tunnel will be probably the English title. Tunnels in the plural. So these 3 big graphic novels, each one a little bigger than the last. So by my count, the third one, so it's going from 160 to 280 pages. The third one should be about fourth one should be about 400. We'll see about that. Anyway,
60 pages.
Yeah, so these 3 books put Rutu on with these 3 books, I should rather say, Rutu put Israel really on the map of the comics history. And so we want to hear about these stories today. And Rutu, I want to mention Rutu is also teaching comics or illustration as a professor in Tel Aviv.
Both, yeah.
Yes, and so you are used to present and talk about.
Yeah, but in Hebrew.
In Hebrew, yeah. Me too, not in Hebrew, in German. So we have 3 different flavors of English tonight. The German version, the Polish version from Monika, and the Hebrew version from Rutu, which we will hear now. And me and Monika will now mute ourselves and make ourselves invisible and come back for the Q&A part after Rutu's talk. So you can, again, I remind you, can think of questions during the talk and then put them in the Q&A formula at the bottom of the menu on Zoom, or the F&A in German, as it's called. So see you in a moment. I'm giving the floor to Rutu now.
Yeah, sorry, one technical thing. The meeting is available in English and in Germany. You just need to change the language in your modes on the bottom of the page. So please use which is better for you.
And maybe for Polish audience, of course, you can ask questions in Polish. Yes.
Yes. Yes. So you can write your question preferably in English in the Q&A formula, but also in Polish. Monika can translate, or in German, and I will make a translation.
Or in Hebrew as well.
Hebrew, yeah.
Yes, and then just trust that Rutu will not change the question.
We'll check it. We'll check it.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you so much, Rutu Modan. Floor is yours.
Okay. I will share my screen. Just a second. Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I mean, in the Zoom meeting. I start with this because I'm often asked about why I'm not doing it, commentary, comics, why I'm using fiction, and my answer is that that my fiction is also the commentary. And I start with this, and it's what more or less what my lecture is going to be. And I start with this image, is illustration I did at comics I did in the age 7. There was a war in Tel Aviv, in Israel, the Yom Kippur War, and I was living at the time. My family lived in a hospital. My parents were doctors, and there was this neighborhood for people who worked in the hospital. They lived in a neighborhood inside the hospital. So we children, we saw everything that happens. The helicopters that came from the war landed near where we used to play, even not in wartime. Like we were actually seeing everything. You know, at the time nobody thought that it's important to hide something for us. And this is a comics that I did about the war at the time. And it's a child of interpretation of what I saw around me. There was a soldier, a wounded soldier coming to from the front. You see this bunny with weapons and a carrot in the ear. So, and this is from a very many years afterwards, when I was already a professional comics artist in my 20s, and I did this comic strip in a newspaper called The Children of Paradise, and this is a comics about a new invention, how to turn off kids, that you can turn them off and they can stop and off and on. According to what you want, and this is very useful for parents, especially in the Corona time. And I was at the time I was a young mother, and so it's a joke, but it was already also, you know, the idea came from my experience with the small babies that always cried, and I couldn't, and I wanted to go and draw comics. So it's just an example of how life are always entering art, and always it's always based on something, on my experience, of things that I see around me. And later in life, I was, you know, I live in Israel. It's a very complicated place for an artist, because they are all and for everyone, yes, but especially if we want to portray it or want to speak about it, it's difficult because the politics, everything is politics, and sometimes this it's a burden for the artist, because I want to deal with things, you know, with subject of my life, about things that bother me, and always this political thing that I'm expected to refer to. And especially when I was working outside, my books were published outside Israel, there was always this question, because people were trying to, why I felt the expectations of people for me to explain them what is going on in this place. We don't understand the conflict. Maybe your comics will tell us what is the solution. And so for many years, I didn't know how to deal with it. And even when the last one is the comics, I put my stories in Sweden or in places that are not specific. And even if I drew this comics was take place in Tel Aviv, I used locations in Tel Aviv because I like to draw them. I felt attached to them, but it's still a story that could happen anywhere. Really, it's not necessarily a story that could happen only in Tel Aviv. And for this lecture, I found this quote from it's an American writer, William Melville Kelly. He's a Black author, and I thought that he said in a very nice words that what I felt so many years, that he's talking here about the same expectation from him as a Black author to write or to explain or to preach about experience of Blacks in America. And at the same time, he feels that he is an individual. He has so many other subjects that he wants to speak about, and it's the burden of having this category that you are put into. And he said, I am an American Negro. I hope I'm a writer, but perhaps the latter statement is not mine to judge. I'm not a sociologist, I'm not a politician, I'm not a spokesman, I'm just an author. I want to ask questions and not to give answers. And I actually feel the same. It was about this story, The Homecoming, was the first time that I found a way to speak about political situation in my own voice, and not as a preacher or as someone who has to tell you my opinion. And this was a story that based on something that I read in the newspaper. It was the beginning in 2000, and this was a very difficult time in Israel. It was many suicide bomb after the Oslo agreements collapsed, and there were many suicide bombers, suicide terrorists. It was almost every day there was something was happening. And this was something, and there was this event that a small airplane arrived from Lebanon, and the pilot didn't identify himself. So it wasn't clear if it's who is it, and is it a suicide bomber? And in the end, the army bombed the plane because they were afraid that it's going to have some disaster is going to happen. And I read it, and what attracted my attention was that in the newspapers it said that the body of the pilot fell on the table of a schoolmaster. And without the head. And this grotesque image, I was like, it sounded like a comics. And I invented this story about the people who were standing on the beach at the time of the airplane the smaller airplane arriving from Lebanon. And the people standing on the beach, and one of them, an old man, thinks it's his son that was kidnapped in Lebanon 7 years before that. And he convinced himself that his son managed to escape somehow, stole an airplane, and he's coming back. And he's afraid to land because he's afraid that he wasn't at home so many years. And so the old man is trying to encourage his son, what he thinks is his son, to land. And then the Israeli Air Force bombed the airplane, and it fell on the beach. And then the old man and the body, body of the pilot, is without a head. And the old man said, yes, it's not my son, even though, he cannot know. And for me, it was a story about how there are many facts, there are so many facts around us, and how people use the facts just to they adjust the facts according to the opinions and not vice versa. The facts are, and now in our time of the corona, it's so clear that this is a situation. There are so many facts are running around us and so many opinions, and we have to instead of opening ourselves to new ideas, we close ourselves in our opinion and justify everything according to what is convenient for us. And so this was the first time that I felt that I took some political situation, but I used it in a fiction in a way that I could tell something about it, that it's not just a defense of my country or the opposite. Just to explain what is the experience. And that led me to a second short story, Jamilti, and this was also about a bomb. And in this story, there was this bride to be, but she is also a nurse, and she is involved in she's walking in the streets. There is after she's picking her bride dress, and there is a bomb in a cafe, and she is entering the cafe, and there is a wounded person there, and since she is a nurse, she's trying to save him, only to find out later that it was a suicide bomber. It was the terrorist that she was trying to save. And this was also based on a true story that happened in Israel, and I read it about it again. I read it about it in the newspaper. It was almost the same, that this wasn't a young girl and wasn't a nurse, but the person who tried to save the terrorist was a settler. He was a very right-wing man and settler, and he told it to the reporter. He was shocked to find that he was trying to save the terrorist, and he said that the first thing he did, that he went to the hospital to check if he didn't catch any disease. He was such a racist thought that it was probably a disease that he could get from the terrorist. And in this situation, you see that the reality was even more symbolic. I couldn't use the reality as it is, because making the one who tried to save it a settler would make it like a symbol for something big that I wanted to say about the relationship between the two nations. And I had to even not just to use reality as it is, but even to settle it a little bit to make the point that I wanted to say. The two stories led directly to the first graphic novel, the first long graphic novel that I wrote, because the publisher, Drone Quarterly, a Canadian publisher, saw the stories, and he wanted a book, commissioned the book for me. It was a dream come true. I always wanted to write a real graphic novel. And it was 2004, I think, that I started working on it. And again, it was about the same, more or less the same subject. This time it was about a suicide bomb okay, this one it was based on a documentary film about a bombed bus, and 17 bodies were 7 people were killed, and one of the body wasn't identified. And the director of the film, it's a great film. Maybe if you can find it, I really recommend to watch it. It's called Number 17. And the director tried to find who was this unidentified person. It seems that it was someone who nobody missed, because he disappeared and nobody came to claim for the body. This was what was strange about it. And that gave me the idea for this graphic novel, where this young soldier comes to meet the hero of the book. His name is Kobe, and she tells him that there was this bomb in a central bus station, and there was a body that wasn't identified, and she thinks it's his father. And he finds out that his father was the lover of this young soldier. And together they're going to look for the truth. They're going to look. The father disappeared from his life, from Kobe's life, 2 years before the books begin. They went in a journey in Israel, looking all over the country to look for the identity, if it was really his father. But for me, it was an opportunity to talk about life in the shadow of terror, but also to give the reader a tour of Israel as I see it. And this was, for example, this kiosk was a place in Tel Aviv that I put it in the book, but I really liked how this place, and now it's not exist anymore. There's a mobile phone shop there. Everything is turned into mobile shops, I think. And so it was an opportunity to draw this place that I always liked. Or to show things that are in Israel that maybe people are not a regular image of Israel. For example, this Coca-Cola stand that it's in the book. It's a Coca-Cola stand turned into a memorial for those who died who were killed in the bombing. And it was based on something that I really saw in Tel Aviv. And what I liked about it, it's so it's so symbolic. It's nice that people. It's a habit here in Israel. You see it even for car accidents sometimes. People building like this small memorials on the side of the road or something. And here it was. In real life, people built arranged this memorial for the dead people who were killed in the terror, and I put it into the book because I liked the fact that this stand who was supposed to sell was selling soft drinks, American soft drinks, turned into this something that sells real sorrow, real feelings, and this mixture of everyday life, of big things in life, death and sorrow and terror, politics, and the mixing it with everyday simple objects was something that for me it represents my life in Israel. Or this place, they're going to look. There is the forensic laboratory. This is a place. There's only one like this in Israel because Israel is very small, and this is where all the bodies of people who died not a natural death, are brought here, including people who were brought in, who died in terror attacks. And so this was, and I put it in the book just because I really wanted to show this place, and I wanted to. This place is so strange and creepy, and I thought about these people who are. I went to see it. I went to take some photos, and you see this woman. She said, again the combination of people who dealing with a dead body, and at the same times you have to eat lunch, like this is the day job. The people who work that this is the day jobs, they have to eat. They I asked one person when I went there. I asked one person, why did he come? Why did he choose it as a career to come and work in this horrible place? And he told me, well, I was working in an internal department, internal medicine department in a hospital, but I didn't like the atmosphere. So he liked this atmosphere more. And but also I want to see things that I like in Israel, that I like or I love here, because it's not very popular to say, but I like to live here, even with all the problems. And the ocean is the Mediterranean Sea is one of the biggest advantages that we have. As I said, I love the sea. I always live near it, and I go there often. It was an opportunity for me to draw it and to show it, to put it in the book, and not to show that Israel is not only war and bombs and forensic laboratories. So I continue to use this is not a comic story that I did that happened in the hospital where I grew up in. It was, for me, it was coming home. I spent a lot of time taking photos, going in the departments and taking photos, and then to use a location that for me was very, it's really strange to say it, but because it was my childhood, I'm really attached to this place, to the hospital, and I always feel there at home. And so it was nice to make a story that takes place there. It's a detective story. And in 2009, it was I had an opportunity to try. I said, okay, why I'm not doing it, the commentary comics? And I got this commission for a French publisher for an anthology from documentary comics for journalists or comics journalism from all over the world. And at the beginning, I said, no, I'm into fiction. I don't like to do it. But it was the time of one of the Gaza wars. And really, the situation was really very bad, and it was horrible. I really suffered it was, for me, it was so unnecessary and wrong. So I told myself, well, I cannot just close my eyes to it. If I get if somebody asks me to write about it, to draw it, I think I have to give it a try. And I asked a friend of mine, a journalist, Yigal Sarna, a very famous journalist in Israel, to take me to the south, because I'm not so brave. So I was afraid a little bit. The war was still going on. We couldn't go to Gaza, of course, but we went to the border, and we met with people who lived there, and spoke with them, and this was and I tried to this was in French. This is French because it was French anthology. But and it was really a very, very interesting experience, especially working with this journalist and see how he speaks with people, how he makes interviews. I learned a lot from him. But to tell you the truth, I didn't feel really comfortable with these comics. I didn't feel it's exactly what I want to do, and I decided I'm going back to fiction. I felt that in fiction, I can tell I'm more free to speak because I'm not, because I can use reality, but I'm not, so it's not, but I'm free to use it as I like, and I'm free to change it, and then maybe with changing it, not to hide anything, but on the contrary, to be able to speak more openly without, without thinking how people will react, how people that I'm talking about will, maybe they will not feel comfortable with it, or maybe it's not exactly what happened. I make it even more accurate. Maybe I'll speak about it later to explain. Anyway, at the same time, I got this another nice project to write for the New York Times website, to write 6 stories, and I decided to speak about my since it was every month, and I had to supply a story every month. I decided to write about autobiographical stories about my family, and I wrote this. One of the stories was about my grandmother, who's an immigrant from Poland, but she was never really felt comfortable in Israel, and I was, this, and she never understood me. I felt that she never understood me, and we didn't get along so well. And this was a story about how I took her to the hairdresser, and it's about our relation. And this story was published in the New York Times website and got a lot of reactions, comments. It was quite new then for me, and all these comments, they told me, "Oh, it's exactly like my grandmother." And it's exactly my relationship with my grandmother. The people from Korea, from Italy, from the United States. And I felt that everybody knows in Israel, we say there's a Polish grandmother. In Israel, it means like Yiddish mame. And I felt that all the world has probably all the world have a Yiddish mame. And this encouraged me, or gave me the idea for the property, which is my second graphic novel. And this story was about a grandmother and a granddaughter who's going to Poland to look for the family property that was lost during the World War II. My family is from Poland, from Warsaw, both sides, and but they left. They left just before the war. They came to Israel. And I was always, in my grandmother's, both of them agreed. I remember one family dinner that they spoke, we spoke about Poland. Poland was, I think it was in beginning of the 90s, and Poland was suddenly open to the end of the communist regime, and Poland was suddenly open for Israel to Israelis to come and visit. And my uncle asked my grandmother if he doesn't want to go to Poland to see her, to visit it again. And she said, like this woman like the grandmother in the story, that for her, Warsaw is just one big cemetery. And she didn't want to go back, and both of them agreed that they don't want to go to this place. It's too difficult for them. So for the book was for me like an imaginary trip that I didn't do with any of them. In the story, the grandmother and the granddaughter are going to Poland, and then the grandmother changes her mind, and she suddenly doesn't want to look for the property. And the thing is that she has a secret that she didn't tell her family, that she has an old lover. She left Poland when she was 15 or 16, and she was pregnant with the father of the young woman. But it's a secret that nobody knows, or she thinks nobody knows. So since she's not looking for the property anymore, the young woman has a flirt with a young Polish guy. He's a comics artist. And I won't tell you everything, but of course things are getting complicated, and this things about the property, and I'm not what tell the whole story, but what I wanted to say is that this story, I had the idea. I didn't know anything yet. I didn't know also, I didn't know about Poland anything, because in my family, as I said, it was a big, they referred to Poland as a cemetery and not as a place. And even though I was only a second generation, my father was 8 when he came to Israel in 1940. I was a second generation or first generation in Israel. Second to immigrant from Poland. I didn't know anything about this country, not about its history, not about how it looks like. And I said, okay, so first of all, I said, I'll go there. I'll go to see Warsaw. I didn't even add an image in my head about Poland. It was so, my family, they just put it as like it was never nothing to do with us. And one of started speaking with people about Poland, what's nice to see in Warsaw, and one of them said, well, you have to go to, if you're going, try to go at the time of the All Souls Day, because it's amazing. It's amazing. All cemeteries full of lights, and it's really a wonderful experience. And I said, okay, I'll go in the beginning of November, end of October, and the image was in my head even before I went there. The image of this cemetery with lights, with full of people remembering the dead, as a connection to Poland, the history of Jewish and Polish people, because this was actually the subject of the book for me, about the past, about the relationship between Polish and Poles and Jews. And I had this image in my head, like I didn't know the story yet, but I knew that that some of it will take place in this cemetery. And I went there, and it was really so yeah, like a fairy tale or something, so strong, so strong. And so I put also some images, how I used it in the book, and people here from Poland probably recognize the cemetery and the event. And in Warsaw, this is I always go to this place. I think that the place is giving me. As I said, I didn't know what the story is about. Just this, didn't have. I knew just this in general. And I went to Warsaw, and I knew that the place will tell me. The place itself will tell me. It will give me location, or will give me ideas, so I will know more. About I want to tell about. And this is an example. I went to the so only building that remained from the Jewish ghetto in Warsaw, that they didn't destroy, because it's again like a memorial. But when I came there, it was, what struck me was these photos that were put on the building of people of the Jews who died. And for me, it looked like the whole building with windows, but also with these big portraits, looked to me like comics, like frames of comics. And this is like I put it into the book. It was yeah, like it was waiting for me to as a material, we can say. Or the photoplasticon. That somebody told me about it. I looked for a location that wasn't destroyed. It wasn't destroyed. That it's the same as it was before the war, because my story is talking about current time and time before the war. I want to this place that just is still as it is. And somebody told me about the photoplasticon, a very strange place. You look and this people look at you see what you see is slides of old Warsaw at the time when before the war. What the slides people who came to see here of places around the world. And so this was for me first of all perfect location for a meeting for the old people. The two old people, the woman and the man, who didn't see each other for 70 years. And where would they meet? They would meet in a place, and she didn't live in Poland for so many years. She wasn't in Poland. So they will meet in a place that they used to know when they were young. But it was also a really nice image to draw, some strangers in this image, something that has no rational, no, that's not even unnecessary object. Yes, and this is what the beauty of it. It's an unnecessary object, but it exists for so many years. But it's also, gave me and this is why I say that I have something in my head or something that is an idea, but the place itself gives also solutions for drawings. For example, the fact that it's in this machine, the entrance of the person who was in a control room is inside, and the door is on the floor. And this is kind of funny, they have this, the operator and the old people, they have this dialogue, and he's crawling on the ground, and it gives such in this quite a serious and touching scene, something humoristic, just from the fact that he is crawling on floor. And this is what I also like about comics. It's like the frames are, they have you have the frame, but the frame has many depth layers that you can use for. And here, for example, she remembers the old woman. She's taking a cab, and she's going through the streets of Warsaw, and the window of the cab becomes a window to the past. It becomes like a frame inside a frame, and a frame to time. So I just think that I liked in Warsaw because even the shops for clothes for old women, who reminded me shops in Tel Aviv, I felt that Warsaw is not so far away from Tel Aviv, because so many immigrants of Polish immigrants are living here. And you see it in the, in the food, or on shops, or in really small things that I couldn't be aware of. How Warsaw is part of my culture, of the Israeli culture. It was an opportunity to explore it, but also to show it. And another example of how the unique things in a place, like a restaurant in an apartment. Somebody told me about this. Actually, it's a wonderful restaurant for Polish food in Lwowska 11, the address in Warsaw. And for me, it gave a perfect solution for the story. The apartment, the property that they are looking for, was turned into a restaurant. So the old woman has an excuse to come there. This is a restaurant. It's just one, just exactly the same restaurant, how it's represented in the book. And sometimes I see that I have no time. Okay. And even, the opening scene is where the old woman she doesn't want to give up her water. She insists on going to the airport with the water, and when they don't let her, the security don't let her, she insists on drinking all the bottle just not to waste it. And this is a scene, actually, I saw it in my own eyes in the airport one, and I kept it in my memory to just fit perfectly the beginning of the story, to explain the relationship between the granddaughter and the grandmother, and the character of the grandmother. And again, life, the reality, if you just check reality real good, it's so crazy that you don't have to invent anything for your stories. And this was this scene, in this scene, there is a group of young Poles who are do a reenactment of the war of Jews being deported in World War II. It was and the hero of the young girl is shocked, and she thinks it's real Nazis, and then this guy from a family supposedly saved her. He also thinks it's real. It's happened in real time. It's really happening, and believe it or not, this was really something that I saw in a TV. It really happened. This crazy idea to stage this, to give experience, like the real experience to young people will understand what really happened. It was, for me, from my eyes as an Israeli, it was crazy, it was kitsch, it was, but also a wonderful scene for my book. I wanted to speak about, maybe if I have time later, I'll speak about, because I see that I didn't range my time so well. This is just a cover of the book, because I want to speak a little bit, if the time that I left, about how I work, the way I work on with actors. In comics, this is connected to the way I write. I write my stories, scripts for the comics. I don't use captions so much. I don't write what people think inside their head. I try to the reader will understand what people what the characters think just from the action, for what they say or what they do. And for this, I have to rely really strongly on body posture and how people act with, because with the comics is, you have the text and you have the image, and you can show as a contradiction between what people, because sometimes we say what we think, but sometimes, many times, we don't say exactly what we think or what we feel. And the comics is a really nice, very strong in showing it. So I wanted I want each of the scenes, because of it, I want each character in my book to have his own or her own body language, and how to the way. And I used to work with friends and family. I used to ask people to model for me for the comics. And one of my stories, again, it's a story that I did for the New York Times, a sequential story. One of my friends who modeled for me, she's an actress, she's a professional actress. And then I found out that actors are so talented, I knew it, but I didn't think about it. They are talented just for it, just to show they're expert in using the body and face to say, to express themselves. So, sorry, I won't talk about this, but just for example, how to use actors. I took photos. I take photos, like in the book. I direct the actors, and then after I took the photos of the whole, I have a storyboard of the whole book. I draw a storyboard for each frame, what's going to what you see in the frame, what people say, and then I direct the actors according to the storyboard. And afterwards, I went to Poland and took pictures of photos of location, and then I draw it together in the final comics. These are just few examples. The restaurant, and the restaurant that I in my apartment, how it and then how it is in the drawing. And what's interesting is also I invented the characters, and I tell them what the actors what to say and how to act and what to do. They still have their own experience, their own ideas. And it influenced the comics. For example, in the property, the fact that the two lovers have really a couple in real life, I think it influenced how you felt. I think that you see their emotions through this the drawings. I put this photo because I think it's connected to my last book. That I don't know if I still have time to talk about it, but remember this photo that I liked. I found when I did the research for the property, but I kept it on my computer. I didn't use it. So I'm just will show you the time that I have the tunnels. My last book, it was published just a few months ago, and this story is about this young woman, Nili. Father is an archaeologist, and he now is dementic, and but he when she was a young girl, and her father thought that he found the location of the Ark of Covenant, and illegally they went together and digged for it. They didn't find it, but now she wants to go back to the digging and find the Ark to prove that her father was right. But now the old digging is behind the wall, the separation wall. It's in the actually in the Palestinian territory. So she had this, and this is a brother that he doesn't believe that the Ark is there. So she collaborates with this collector and with a settler and some young religious boys who believe that the Ark is real and has really very important big mystical powers that can save Israel from all the enemies. She has this idea, Nili had this idea to dig under the wall into the Palestinian territory and look for until they reach the old digging and continue from there. And there is this professor, the head of the archaeology department. He's her nemesis because he's trying to reach the Ark before she does. So again, I had the idea, and it was based actually it was based on a real story. I knew this guy when I studied in the Academy of Art 30 years ago. I knew this guy that his father was a friend of mine, and he told me that during his high school years, he and his father were digging in a mountain in Jerusalem looking for the Ark. They did it for years, and it was located near an Arab village. And since it was a little bit dangerous, his father gave him, and he was 14 at the time, his father gave him a gun, a pistol. And sometimes he went and digged by himself because his father had to go to work or something. At the time it was, and they didn't find the Ark, of course. At the time I didn't, I thought, okay, it's really a joke or something crazy family. But the fact is, they weren't really crazy. They were more or less, a regular family. And a few years ago, I suddenly remembered the story and I said, okay, maybe this can be, why did they did it? They weren't religious. They were, people, I knew the family very well, very nice family. And why they did it? And I thought suddenly that it could be a story because it reminded me of Indiana Jones and the Lost Ark. And it was like a treasure story or adventure story. I knew nothing about archaeology at the time. I went to the archaeology department in Jerusalem, which is an amazing place. And again, what struck me is the combination of the holy and the daily, you can say, of things that are supposed to be, we think about them like antiques from, these things are, some of them, they be 2,000, 3,000 years old. And they're just, and we used to think about that should be displayed in a museum behind the glass. But the fact is there are so many of it in Israel, so many that people don't know what to do with them anymore. It's like, you know, a piles of garbage in this department in the university. This is like boxes from, you know, beer boxes, vegetable boxes, wine boxes. They used to collect these artifacts, important artifacts, boxes of bones. This was bones in the mud, all kind of things that you can, I opened the cupboard, there was this skulls. Oh, this is skull of a mammoth. Just, you know, somebody put it in his office. So for me, it was also a way to try to understand, first of all, to understand my history, to explore my history, to explore the myth and stories that I was told in school, or because politics in Israel is so involved with stories, just stories that from the past, that some of them are what is legend, what is reality, is not just that it's not clear. It's even, you know, I feel it's not always important, because even if people will know that it's not true, they are still willing to die for these stories. And I understood that it was a very important point when I understood that the story is going to take place in the Palestinian territory. Because I understood that ancient Israel, and again, I'm a little bit even ashamed to say it, I didn't know it, that the ancient Israel, the kingdom of David and Solomon, and all this, it was actually in the Palestine, what is now the Palestinian territory. On the beach in Tel Aviv, there were Philistines and you know, other nations that are no longer exist. And this was actually a very sad truth, because I understood that we are not fighting about all the territory of Israel and we have to divide it. We are fighting on, no, not we, not I, but the Israeli religious settlers. What important for them are not are this exactly the same place, exactly the same land as it's important to the Palestinians, and that this conflict is much more complicated even than I thought before. And these settlers say, you mean it's in the territories? The territories are even more Israel than Israel. This is how I put it in the book. Anyway, when they dig in the, they suddenly bump into another digging of Palestinians that are digging from the West Bank behind the wall, that they are like a prison. That territories are sometimes put it as a prison for Palestinians. And so they are trying to dig a tunnel inside to the other side, and the two tunnels meet. And then the Palestinians also becomes part of the digging group. And this was this scroll about who the tunnel belongs to. It's like a very short dialogue who describes exactly how I see the Palestinian and Israeli conflict. Who is it? Who it belongs to? Is it belong to my dad? No, my dad started it, and then you left, but we came back, and now we are here. But we were here first, this endless quarrel about, and it's even, I make fun of it. It's but a little bit, because it's like a quarrel of kids. Who were here first? Who it belongs to? And I don't know if I have time. I'll show just really quickly some photos of if I went to the West Bank and looked for locations, but also tried to listen to the place. I can say, just to understand the colors, to understand the atmosphere, to see how it looks. Is it exactly like Israel? It's like an unknown country, but it's 2 kilometers from not 2 kilometers, 5 kilometers from my home, and it's a strange country. And so for me, it was just to use I usually I don't go there because it's some political thing to go to the West Bank. But I think it was important to me to understand this place for the story, and to understand to try to explore and try to find something to say about the relationship between the army and the settlers and the all to explore the ugly things, things that are not necessarily nice for me to find as an Israeli, as a farmer from the left. Even not everything is in the book, but everything is inspiration for the story, inspiration for many things, inspiration for the story. The portrait of the Shaheed, the key to the fact that the walls are drawing on the wall with a garbage underneath it. It was just the end. So it's the Shaheeds are drawn on the wall. It's not, I didn't use it as it is, but it was an inspiration to speak about Palestinian myth, because the story is about the Ark, about the Jewish myth and how it's used politically. And this was an opportunity to speak about a Palestinian myth, about Abu Qadr al-Hassani, was a very important leader of Palestinian during the 48 war, and he was killed by the Israeli soldiers. And he's also suddenly appears in the book, and this is a Palestinian guy who's dressed with his. They find his bunker, and he's wearing his coat, his military coat. I think I'll stop here because I see that I speak for an hour already. So now, yeah, I will.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rutu, for this fantastic presentation. Yeah. So I think it was a very, very great overview of your work and about the scope of your stories. And yeah, I encourage everyone to read the new one, The Tunnel, but also check out the first two graphic novels, Exit Wounds and The Property, which to me, when I reread them before our talk today, they feel still so very fresh. If somebody told me that your new book, I would have believed it too. Mm. And now we already have a few questions in the Q&A waiting for us, and encourage everyone to write your questions in there. And we have now strictly 30 minutes for this part, not to get too long and stress our great translator Carolina too much. So while we are gathering more questions, I invite maybe Monika. If I don't know if you have maybe a question to kick off this part.
I have one impression. For me it was very interesting when you were talking about the Bushki property, and it was funny because since there Warsaw changed so much, and I was thinking about how it's about this the whole process, because it's based on the documentary, yes, no real photos, but since there so many things change even in the city. So from the perspective of time, in my opinion, it's begin a documentary comics about Warsaw, yes. So in fact it was somehow fictional story, because your grandmother never came back to Warsaw, but somehow when I just was looking at this frames from your comics, I had this impression it's became a documentary comic somehow. Yes, so this is like my main impression. But I get through the questions, and we have some similar questions about how you're using photos in your comics. I think it was the lecture about how you're using photos, actors, and documentary process in your comics. But I think we have some very interesting question from Lena Möller. how any of your stories been turned into play or films?
What or how?
Have any of
I
your,
have not okay. The property actually was they made the Chicago Opera made an opera from the property. Yes, and this was really surprising for me. And they used what was nice is they used my comics as an inspiration for the art. And so some of so it's funny because I took photographs and then I drew them, and then they used the drawings and made for act with actors again. It was like this circle. But also my sister is a scriptwriter and an actress here in Israel, and she's planning to do a film from the property. We already have some of the budget and the Polish producer, but the Corona is making everything stuck. It's stuck, but we are still hopeful that it will happen.
Yeah, everything will be like in the next year. Yes.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah. So this is also a very interesting question from the same person. I mean, Lena. How much of yourself are in your characters?
Well, I think a lot, because again, when I have to think about characters, I of course I think about people that I know, but really knowing deeply someone is I know myself, and I know that I think draw ideas for my own experience, but in life and feelings, but it's not like again one-to-one. It's I become any characters I invent, I become the character, and there are things that are close to me in every character, but it's not really me. Actually, one of the reasons that I do fictional comics is because I don't like to really. I'm a secretive person, and I don't like to. I'm not such an open person, so it's a way to speak about things that I think without saying out loudly, this is me.
Maybe this has also a little bit to do with your work with photos in your comics, because this question, how much of you is in them, that what makes them so lively to me is that I think you are really able to incorporate this, even though you have actors playing the roles, so to say, and that which you direct, you still have to somehow think their actions to not just trace a photo.
No, I draw very freely on the photos, and according to what the character that I have in mind. But also I write the character, and I write what they say, and many times they say things that I want to say, but I'm not. Maybe I don't dare. For example, in a character, I can be racist, I can be stupid, I can be stingy. I can be many things that maybe I have that I hide, that I try to hide. And if it's a character in comics books, then it's, I'm safe. And also my family is safe, because sometimes I use their characters and I tell very bad things about them, or some family secrets. And but it's, I'm hiding it. So
yes, I mean, I noticed that your characters often have a certain impertinence, if I dare say. They're often very theatrical and a bit shameless in the attitude. So maybe, yeah. Do you see? Is this could this be like a bit of a tradition, storytelling tradition in the Middle East? This
what?
Yeah, this theatricality and this presentation of certainly the grandmother in the property, for instance. They have a certain attitude that I am in a different way. I find in Middle Eastern storytellers sometimes, or in the Jewish comedic tradition.
Yeah, in general, what they say about Israel is, and it's, oh, sorry, that now that everything is out. It's even, you know, I'm considered, as I said, I consider myself like I'm not an open person, but maybe, but when I used to live in England for a while, and there I was, you know, I was considered rude and very open and free person. You know, it's I think it's compared to what's yeah, the culture habits are. But yeah, it's difficult to say when you live in a culture what is, because every, you know, you when you live like you it's like they say that you know, somebody told me that the Japanese thinks that all white people look the same, and for me it's like, what, how can it be? We have different color of hair, different color, we are different heads. But when you live, so when you live inside the culture, you see the individuals, you see the details, you see the difference between people. But when you look from the outside, maybe, you know, something is more general is coming out. I try to portray what I see and how I see things, and then the reader is to judge. You know,
Yes,
to judge.
certainly. It certainly is more general and more specific at the same time, because in your first book on the back there's a quote from a journalist who was wondering that somehow the Middle Eastern conflict is present and not, strangely, not present in this book. And I was just thinking, having been only one time shortly to Tel Aviv, that when you're out there, that you see, yeah, the things are present, but also there is much more, and there's much more nuance to things. And
yeah, because
unexpected.
you know, because politics isn't everything. It is about, I think, what was the main thing that I want to speak about in the book, that it's not from the outside, from the news, maybe from somebody who sees Israel through the news, through the media. Yes, it's part of the everyday life, but at the same time, we're also everyday life like everybody else. We think about food, we think about kids. I have this story that again, when my daughter was really small, and she was still in kindergarten, so it was 20 years ago, again in the beginning of the 2000, and it was 4 o'clock. I ran to the kindergarten to take her because I was late, and a friend of mine stopped me in the street, and he said, "Did you hear that there was a terrorist took over the central bus station and shooting from there?" And it was 1 kilometer from where I stood, because we are living really near close to not so far from the central bus station. And I said, "Okay, it sounds interesting, but I'm sorry, I'm late for the kindergarten." And I went to the kindergarten, and I was running to the kindergarten, and I was aware that it's a crazy situation. But at the same time, I had to go to the kindergarten because my daughter was waiting, and she would cry if I would come take her, pick her up on time. So this is represent for me life, you know, life in the place of conflict, situation.
Maybe we can follow this with a question about your process and how you transform these inspirations and real life events and history into your concrete stories. So there's a question: do you work from a completed script first and then begin with the artwork, or do you let the artwork and visual recordings guide your story?
No, I write a full script, very, very accurate. Of course, it can be changed afterwards during the process of the drawing. But since my stories are really structured, and it's really difficult to and okay, when you draw comics, you know, it's like a jigsaw puzzle that everything has to fit, all the frames has to fit, and I have to take into consideration the size of the frames, and how is you can't take just a frame out of the comics because you have a hole. It's not like in a text that you can erase a line and nothing will happen. It's so I cannot risk this. I cannot, and also drawing. Okay, writing is the most difficult for me. It was the difficult part for me, but in the same time, writing, when you know, it's like saying tree or writing the word tree is not like, it takes less time than drawing a tree. So the drawing process is like, it takes a lot of time. So I cannot take the risk that I will draw a whole house with details, and then I said, No, I don't actually. I don't want they to live in my. I want them to live in a tent, and then no. So I have to plan everything, write everything. I write a script, almost like in a movie, but it's for me to draw. So I already think about the drawing when I write, but I write everything first. Then I draw a storyboard, very, very rough storyboard, but accurate about of the whole book, each page, and then just then I take the photos, draw the characters, and etc.
Great. So just a little aside before we continue with the questions. So the Pilecki-Institut would be very grateful for all the participants if you kindly check out a questionnaire that you put in the chat for everyone to see for a little evaluation of these events. That would be helpful for the Institute's work. So having said that, we continue with the questions. Monika?
We have some opinions from Glini, and he or she waiting for tunnels into English, but there's like center wonder. I wonder how your ideas about archaeology have changed over the course of writing, drawing the book.
Well, first of all, I was not interested in archaeology before I wrote the book. I was always interested in history, but not archaeology. You know, I went to a museum, just went through the department. I wasn't necessarily interested. I found out archaeology. First of all, I found out that archaeology is the most amazing subject because everything is connected to it: history, politics, crime, and all kinds of crazy people, strange people that are involved in it, and I learned a lot, and especially I learned about you know, I was told history. The history as it was told is told in the education system in Israel. Well, it's not, they don't think it's political, but it is political. They tell you the story how you are supposed to, like the Zionist story, and they tell it like, and they start from the Bible, okay? So they don't say that the Bible, we study the Bible, not religiously, because I didn't go to religious school. So I studied it like a culture study, those like stories when I'm very, really early age. So they don't, and you study history and you study Bible separately. But at some certain point, they start relating to the Bible as history as well. And it's not clear where, it's very vague. And so one of the questions, the first question that I asked myself when I started reading was, what really happened? What is in the Bible? What is a legend and what is history? Is there an answer to it even? And archaeology was, you know, it's one of the tools or is the biggest tool to understand what is history and what was real. Of course, it's limited tool. It's a limited tool. It's not a coincidence. You know, Israel is the most digged place in the world because of the Bible. I was told by an archaeologist that it's the most, you know, the early first archaeologists, they came here. They came to prove that they were Christians. They came to prove that the Bible is real, and looking for evidence. You know, so for me, it was also very, very important and always interesting to try to separate history and myth. And this is something really, really relevant to this day politics, because it still uses the myth, not, and the stories are used, and these stories, this legend, all these history is used now, in these days, to justify injustice or to justify the facts that we hear, or to prove something, and you know, to that we belong here, that it's that we have some rights here. Things that are, you know, it's and this is what, again, things that I wanted to put into the book. This question, not necessarily the answers, because I will tell you something. I found out that the stories, I think I said it before, I will say it again. The stories, even if it's a legend, if it's a very important legend, if it's a legend that was told through many years and influenced the identity of a nation, it's not so important anymore if it was true or not. Like Exodus, for example. Exodus, I heard a lecture of an archaeologist, and I'm almost sure that Exodus didn't happen. You know, that it was this important story, the most important story of the Jewish history. That it's not happened as it told, at least not as it told, and not and for a while, and I was a little bit shocked. No, not so shocked because I'm not religious, and it wasn't a really big surprise, but really it was. And I can tell you that after time passed, I felt that it didn't mean any, it didn't change my mind. It didn't change my identity. It didn't have any influence of how the Exodus is important to me as a part of my, as part of the story about my nation. It's because, and of course, it's complicated. No, it's not. The Palestinians have their myths too. They have their stories, and these stories. This is one of the problems that the stories they don't you can't combine them. It's like we are fighting not only the land, we are fighting the stories. This is something that if I can say it, I hope it's okay that I'm saying it, but I don't have the feeling with German people that will also have a complicated history to share, but we have more or less the same story. Actually, yeah, with people, most of the Germans that I met and when we spoke about the past, we have the same story. We don't have we can, maybe the detail is a little bit different, but the narrative, we agree on the narrative. And this is and so we can be friends because we can share the story. The problem with the Palestinians, and this again in the property, with the Polish and the Jews, we don't share the same story. And this was a problem. I went to Poland. I spoke with people about the past. And all the time I wanted to say, no, this is not what really happened. It happened differently. Because I was told, and but I didn't say it because I understood that I was told stories and the Poles was told stories. And I think this is the reason why it took more years for Israeli to make peace with Polish people than with German people. I know that Poles don't understand it, and think it's injustice, and it is. And the Palestinians, it's also we cannot agree in the story. If we cannot agree in the story, it's very difficult to solve the conflict.
Okay,
Yeah, that's a good follow-up question, maybe to what you just said by Heinrich Ratschen, who's asking, and you can now maybe broaden the scope or put a focus on what you feel like answering. How much are you aware of explaining Israel reality to readers abroad in Canada, France, Germany, etc.? Does that influence your choice of topics or way of storytelling?
Well, first of all, it's so difficult to find a good story. That, a good story is a good story. A good story for a graphic novel that I know that I'm going to work for a few years on it, and it will ruin my life and my family life and my vacations for a few years. So it's like, I don't. So I cannot think about. I cannot limit myself and saying, okay, now I want to speak about this and that. First of all, I'm waiting for the good idea. That for me it will be that it could be interesting. I think it can be an interesting story. Because for me, this is the main thing. The main thing is I'm telling a story. I want the people to read it, to enjoy it. Enjoy it, not necessarily to be that they will be happy, but that they will enjoy it and will think it's interesting. And the story brings subjects with it, themes, and the themes are opportunities to speak about ideas, about thoughts, but I'm not so. But as for the question, I'm not thinking about the audience when I'm writing the story or inventing it. I am thinking if there are things that I think people will completely not understand, maybe to try, because I don't like to explain so much, but to find a way that it will be understandable for people. Maybe that maybe I will write something, an explanation, or in the, but I'm not, but I can, but actually, no, I don't think about the audience. It's such a complicated work to do a book, to do a comics that I will like, you know, my own work. Not, I like a lot of comics, but the comics that I'm doing, that I will make a comics, I invent a story that I will like and I think it's good, that I cannot think about other people, how they will like it, because it will be too much and I won't be able to work. So, but yeah, sometimes the translator has us to struggle. Sometimes we have to put this little star with explanation, but I think I speak about people, and when I speak about people, people can understand people everywhere.
So as far as I know, there's one question from Grzegorz.
Yeah, maybe to end the evening with Grzegorz question by our co-host, and the second to last question here is by Hania Raciowska, sorry, our nice director of the Pilecki-Institut in Berlin, initiator of this project. So Monika, please.
Yeah, maybe first question from Hanna.
Yes.
So it's very long. Your graphic novel about Poland is also very political. You said that in Warsaw you discovered how much Israel is connected to Poland. Do you see any other solution besides love, like in your book, or a solution, or as a solution to understand getting how each other in complicated Polish-Jewish relation?
I think that, well, you could say love maybe is an extreme emotion, more extreme emotion, but just to know the people, you know, just to speak with people. And this was, you know, there's this tours of young high school kids to Poland. They take them, it's almost every high school kids, they go to Poland, they take them to the concentration camps and places, you know, to learn about history, and it's a problem that they don't see the country, they don't meet the people, and there are some guides of who take care, it's important to them that young people will meet people who live, young people, artists, people live now in Poland. For me, this was like, like this was like a mission to me. You know, I wanted to find my connection to the place, but not because just, you know, this finding my roots. Because for me, this was the question. I said, okay, how would this suspicion, these hard feelings, this strangeness of the nation? But it was, you know, it was 2008. It was now I think it changed a lot. And I said to myself, but Jews lived in Poland for thousands of years, 800 years. So there was a reason that they lived there, not in big numbers and not in other countries. So it cannot be only just 6 years of war. The relationships are much better, much deeper than that. And I think that part of the anger is because Jews really felt part of the Polish nation, and my family, at least, when Zionists or something, and they felt it's their friends who, I don't know, again, I'm going to stories that I was told or learned in school, but I know this now because I read a lot about it and I spoke with many people, that the situation was much more complicated and from both sides. And so for me, again, I don't want to be the judge. I want to see I want to bring the evidence. I want to show the opportunity to connect, how to connect, and not how to separate or to. I don't believe in black and white. I don't believe in saints and criminals. I don't believe it exists. It's really extreme. Not with nations. It's the circumstances. I remember that I saw news in the news many years ago. People from Syria who were interviewed about Israel, and one of them said, "Oh, they are not human. The Israelis are not human." And for me, it was what you are. Is it? It was insulting, but it's not like Israel. There are no Israeli who speaks about it about like this about about Arabs or about other nations. So for me, it's what's most important is that people. I want people to speak with people and to bring the voices and to find the connections. And it's not such a big ideas. It's many people say what I say. That I try to do my part a little bit, through my books.
I think using metaphor of tunnels, we are all digging our own tunnel.
Yeah, a tunnel is a way to connect parts. So the tunnel that it's a secretive way. It's underneath, it's underground. There's on the surface there is something situation, and underground there is an opportunity. In the tunnels they have this a kiss between the Palestinian guy and the Israeli guy, and they're both hiding the fact that they are gay, and the fact that they are have a flirt, have something between them. Nobody knows about it, and it's underground. Underground, many things can happen underground. That don't happen there on the surface, where we have to pretend that everything is okay and everything.
Right. Last question of the evening by Grzegorz now. Please.
Thank you so much, Rutu, for an extremely interesting lecture. I saw that you plan to publish The Property in Arabic this year, and I want to ask you how it happened and how you feel completely new soil and new cultural market will be interested in this story, because there are, as how we see it, between Poles and Israelis, or between Germans and Israelis, we have something in common, and we can like find our stories or some of our relatives even stories inside The Property, and how you define it in totally different cultural soil and situation, and how it happened.
It happened like it happens. Somebody wrote me an email. This guy who has a small publishing house. He lives in Paris, but he's publishing in Arabic in Egypt. He's from Egypt. And his grandfather, he said that his grandfather was Jewish, as an Egyptian Jew. So he suggested to print The Property. So for him, it's really important. He tries to connect and to make connection between the Arab culture and the Israeli culture. And of course, I was really happy to do. I was, for me, it's wonderful, and I really want it to happen. It still didn't happen. It's supposed to be published this year, but I don't know if it's the situation is that Israeli culture is boycotted in the Arab world. So I don't. He even doesn't know if people will be willing to read the book. He says that a lot of people are interested in the Israeli culture and Egypt, but they are not. They cannot say it, and they don't dare to say it. But so he's optimistic. I hope that. Of course, but like everywhere else, I want people to read my books, and people from different cultures to. I think I try to write the books not for. It's about it's specific, but it's about, in the end, it's about family, it's about relationship, it is about things that are maybe can be interested to people from other cultures as well. I hope, you know, I can only hope. I'm still amazed that people are really to buy my books, really. It's still sometimes I say, wow, this is something wonderful that happened to me, that my books are being published and people read them all over the world. It's yeah, it's something that really encouraging.
Again, you are digging another tunnel. Thank you so much, Rutu, for amazing
Thank you.
lecture. תודה רבה על פגישה המצוינים. From Berlin to Tel Aviv, thank you so much, our curators of Living Archive Project, Monika, Powalisz, and Pfeiffer. Thank you, our devoted translator, Karolina Gominimowska, and our team from Pilecki-Institut Berlin. And please follow us on our social media. We will be back soon.
Thank you very much. It was wonderful to be here and to speak about my books. And I'm very glad for the opportunity. And I hope that we'll meet someday in person.
Absolutely. We hope so too. Thank you very much, Rutu. And thank you, everyone that who listened tonight. See you soon, we hope.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Right.